Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, with my Week 4 2014 NFL predictions. Well, last week, I had the best regular season week I've had so far. Last week, I went 11-5, so that was drastically better than the week I had before, where I went 7-9. And now, overall for the year, I am 28-20. Which equals up to about 58%. So I'm getting up there at this early point to where I want to be going into the meat of the season. To all fantasy owners out there, I would like to say that the Cincinnati Bengals, Cleveland Browns, Denver Broncos, St. Louis Rams, Arizona Cardinals, and the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks all have byes this week. So if you have the Seahawks defense, A.J. Green, Andy Dalton, the Browns defense, Peyton Manning, any of the Broncos receivers, the Rams defense, Zach Stacy, any of those players, they are all on bye, so bench them this week. Unfortunately for me, I had Peyton Manning and Russell Wilson as my quarterbacks, and then I had to pick up Drew Stanton, but then I realized he was on a bye. So in some ways, I am screwed at this week, but thankfully my opponent had Andy Dalton and Adrian Peterson, and they are both not going to play this week, so that helps me out as well. So there's for that, for all the fantasy owners. What a week in the NFL. So many interesting happenings occurred, such as the Green Bay Packers looking at the worst I've seen them under Mike McCarthy at any time. Just looking at how dominant the Detroit defensive line pushed back and destroyed the Green Bay Packer offensive line really scared me. Along with the inability to make drives for Aaron Rodgers. He only threw for about 170 yards and a touchdown. And the sad thing was, Matthew Stafford had 3 turnovers in the red zone. The Lions gave the ball to the Packers 3 times, and they still only managed 7 points. So I'm very concerned about that. I'm concerned about Lacy not being able to get up to speed where he was last year. That secondary being beat up a bit. Clay Matthews is another injury, so he's going to be back, on the questionable, not 100% list. And just looking at all the weapons that they have around and how unproductive they've been, I'm very concerned about the Packers moving forward. But also, I have to give kudos to the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions, even through all those miscues, still seem to have a very solid defensive front. Get carried by Sue in that front end, can win them games. And I was very impressed how even Stafford made those mistakes. They were able to take advantage of the couple big plays they had and use Reggie Bush effectively enough to win this game. So kudos to the Detroit Lions, and I think they are a legitimate threat for the NFC North just as much as the Packers and the Bears are. Speaking of the Chicago Bears, what a game they had against the Jets. That was very interesting because I felt that the New York Jets basically won the game if it wasn't for their own mistakes. Geno throwing a pick-6 right off the bat. And then, unfortunately, they had a fumble recovery, which I thought should have been a touchdown because I never saw Cutler have his arm move forward or that the play was still a live ball and they should have been able to get in the end zone. And then I remember Antonio Allen getting that terrible pass interference call on Alshon Jeffrey. I thought it was the other way around, which really surprised me with the refs. Jeffrey was pushing Allen's arm down. So it should have been offensive pass. But looking at what happened with the Jets, the fumbled punt, the pick-6, the Jets basically cost themselves the game. And then Geno at the end of the game didn't help by throwing 2 interceptions, the 9th time he's done that in his short 19-game career. So I thought the Bears got lucky, but again, hey, wins are win. And for Jay Cutler not throwing interceptions, it's really helping this team be effective because they're not being put in holes. So, kudos to the Bears over the Jets. Like I said, I feel that game, that was more the Jets screwing themselves in the foot than the Bears actually being that good. Let me see some other games here. I'd like to give a shout-out to the Pittsburgh Steelers for having their offense awake. That was a very impressive display they had against the Carolina Panthers. Carolina's defense is very good, especially in the front end with Kuechly and those boys. But Le'Veon Bell and LeGarrette Blount roughed up that defense for over 250 yards rushing, and he scored 37 points. that was more than combined what they had in the first two games. That was what they had in the first two games. So kudos to Mike Tomlin offense for finally picking up speed. And also, I just think it's a problem because I thought that Cam Newton really wasn't making the throws they needed to, even though Kelvin Benjamin did have a nice game. But I would be concerned just because if you can continue to control the clock with the running game, Carolina's secondary will not be able to handle some of these better receiving cores, and that's going to put them in jeopardy for the rest of the year. So kudos to Pittsburgh, and welcome back their offense. Let's see. Dallas. What a comeback for the Dallas Cowboys, being down 21-0 to Austin Davis, and then being able to come back and win 37-34. That is extreme. No, I'm sorry, 34-31. That's the Eagles-Redskins game. I'll get that in a second. I was very impressed because usually from the Dallas Cowboy teams I've seen in the past, they usually would not be able to make comebacks like that because they'd be so demoralized. Even with Tony throwing another pick six, he went from Tony Romo to Tony Ono, as everybody says, because that's what Romo did. But I thought that Romo and them were able to fight back. DeMarco Murray was still a nice, solid game on the ground, even though I would like to see his hands get better because he has now fumbled on 3 straight games on the opening drive. And I just hope that this Cowboy team can rally around this kind of win because this builds a lot of resolve. And to the Rams, Austin Davis could be your future of your franchise due to how effective he's been in the 2 games. I know Dallas' defense was not that good, but Austin Davis made some good throws and kept this team in offense enough for them to win, even though I'm not a fan of what Jared Cook doing by pushing him in starting confrontation. You shouldn't do that. Let's see. Kudos to San Diego for out gunning Buffalo in a interesting West Coast, East Coast battle, even though best of luck to Danny Woodhead. I'm sorry to hear that he fractured his fibula and is now on IR. So best of luck to UConn's Donald Brown. And I feel like he will be effective enough due to the fact that he has shown that he can be a talented running back for a team in need for it, especially with Ryan Matthews also being out for another 3 weeks with a broken foot. Let's see. What a game in Seattle. Denver and Seattle. An incredible, more well-fought game than in the Super Bowl. Denver's defense came to play in that fourth quarter. They got a big sack and a safety by DeMarcus Ware. Akeem Talib and Chris Harris got a good pick. And Peyton Manning showed that why he is the greatest quarterback in postseason history by driving 80 yards in 40 seconds to tie the game and get a 2-point conversion. But as I said, what I've told people about Russell Wilson, I'm a huge Russell Wilson fan. I believe he is the best young quarterback in the game. And actually right now, if I had to speak of elite quarterbacks, I would put Russell Wilson in that elite quarterback territory. And the drive he orchestrated against Denver would show why. Because that was all him. It was his decision-making. It was his athleticism. It was his arm. And Russell Wilson was able to prove that he deserves more credit than what he gets from the defense in the running game Seattle has. But Denver should not be ashamed. I've considered this a moral victory due to the fact that they know that they can compete against this team. And who knows? If Peyton would have got the ball, he could have probably won with them than they had. And just knowing that they are 2 favorites for the Super Bowl, and if anybody's watched my videos, I took the Broncos and the Seahawks to get to the Super Bowl. So if this happens again, it'll be a much more entertaining Super Bowl this time around than before. And sorry for the Jags and the Raiders, 2 tough, winless squads, and the Bucks. I'll put all of them in there. It was very hard to watch your games because it was disappointing. Even though Oakland, you did a heck of a lot better than everybody thought they did against New England, so kudos to you. Unfortunately for Derek Carr, he got a bad reflect back to Vince Wilfork's arm. But there's my thoughts on that. So that's my thoughts on all last week. Time for my picks. Tonight, when the 1-2 New York Giants go to FedEx Field to take on the 1-2 Washington Redskins, I am taking the Washington Redskins. When the 1-2 Green Bay Packers on Sunday, when the 1-2 Green Bay Packers go to the 2-1 Chicago Bears at Soldier Field, I am taking the Chicago Bears. When the 2-1 Buffalo Bills go to the 2-1 Houston Texans at Reliance Stadium, I am taking the Houston Texans. When the 1-2 Tennessee Titans go to the 1-2 Indianapolis Colts, I am taking the Indianapolis Colts. When the 2-1 Carolina Panthers go to the 2-1 Baltimore Ravens, I am taking the Baltimore Ravens. When the 2-1 Detroit Lions go to the 1-2 New York Jets, I am taking the Detroit Lions. When the 0-3 Tampa Bay Buccaneers go to the 2-1 Pittsburgh Steelers, I am taking the Pittsburgh Steelers. When the 1-2 Miami Dolphins go to the 0-3 Oakland Raiders in London, so I guess this is a home game for the Raiders, even though it is in London. First game in the International Series, 2 more to come. I can't think of the top of my head, but I know there are 2 more international games. I am taking the Oakland Raiders. When the 0-3 Jacksonville Jaguars go to the 2-1 San Diego Chargers, I will take the San Diego Chargers. When the 2-1 Atlanta Falcons go to the 1-2 Minnesota Vikings, I am taking the Atlanta Falcons. When the 3-0 Philadelphia Eagles go to the 1-2 San Francisco 49ers, I'm going to take the Philadelphia Eagles. And in the Sunday night game, when the 1-2 New Orleans Saints go to the 2-1 Dallas Cowboys, I'm going to take the Dallas Cowboys. And on the big Monday night game, when the 2-1 New England Patriots go to the 1-2 Kansas City Chiefs, I am taking the New England Patriots. So, now for my deeper thoughts in each game. Giants at Redskins. Nice little close rivalry there, New York, Washington. This has been one of the great rivalries in the NFC East and in the NFL. Both teams are coming off very good performances against respective competition. Eli Manning, I thought, did a phenomenal job compared to what he's done over the last year and a half by not throwing any interceptions, throwing for about 250 yards and a couple touchdowns. But also what I saw was that New York Giant running game finally was established. And that was one of the biggest elements of how the Giants are successful. They can control the ball. And when you give Rashad Jennings 34 carries for 176 yards and 2 TDs, you're probably going to win a majority of games. Because Eli can then use play action and it'll be effective. And also I saw that Giant defense awake. I saw Ryan Fitzpatrick get under duress. Even though I do understand Arian Foster was not there, so the running attack really was very non-existent from Alfred Blue. But I feel that the New York Giants made a statement win saying that they are not out of this season just yet. But I'm going to take the Washington Redskins because I am starting to believe in Kirk Cousins. And I feel that with what he did against Philadelphia, he actually played a better game than Nick Foles. Cousins completed, 34 of 44, 427 yards, 3 TDs, and a pick. Foles completed for about 327 and 3 TDs, even though I know Foles didn't throw any interceptions. But just looking at how crisp this Redskins offense has been, in the first 2 games, in the 2 games Kirk Cousins has started under center this year, they have scored 37.5 points a game, 75 points. In the last 6 games RG3 played with that offense, they averaged 17.7. So 19.8 point difference in those games. I understand what you're saying, is that it's in only 2 games. But think about it. Alfred Morris was still on the teams. Pierre Garçon was still on those teams. A lot of those defenders were still there, even though best of luck to D'Angelo Hall. I hope he can recover well, even though it is a big loss for the Redskins because he is their number 1 corner, and he is out for the year with a torn Achilles. But I'm going with the Redskins because I'm seeing a Redskin defense, even though I know LaShawn McCoy, did have concussion-like symptoms, that shut down Philadelphia's running game. They beat the crap out of Jacksonville's offensive line. And just looking at what Eli Manning's had to face with overall in the last 3 weeks, he's had to go under a lot of duress. And I feel like they can get through that offensive line. And also throughout his career, in the 18 games he's played against the Washington Redskins, he actually has more interceptions than touchdowns. He has 16 touchdowns compared to 17 interceptions. And I just feel that with this defense, with the more loose defense, they're going to be able to make plays to get Eli to make mistakes, and Cousins will be able to use Morris and control this offense enough to win this game. Because I don't think with Cousins' weapons and how they're playing against Eli right now, I'm going to take Cousins in that tight offensive shootout due to the fact that Cousins has looked more efficient than Eli Manning has. I think it will be very entertaining to see both these teams go at it because the team that loses this game might be out just with their overall psyche. But I'm going to go with the Redskins based on the fact they have better offense, they're more consistent, and they've played pretty well over the 3 games compared to the New York Giants. So that's why I'm taking the Washington Redskins to beat the New York Giants. The Bears over the Packers. I'm taking the Bears because if I had to look at overall talent, I would say the Bears are more talented. I even told everybody around that the Bears are more talented. And just looking at how ineffective this Green Bay offense has been, I just don't see anything changing against this Bear team. That this Bear defense can get to Rodgers. They do have Jared Allen. They do have Lamar Houston. They have Willie Young. They have a whole slew of guys that can get after him. And the secondary, I know Charles Tillman is out, but I like Cutler's chances with the weapons he has with Marshall and Jeffrey, even though Brandon Marshall might not play because I remember he got hurt back in the Monday night game. And I feel that Rodgers' offense won't be able to click as much because I'm just not seeing it. And I feel that if this Bears team had to get into an offensive shootout with this Packer team, I'm going to take the Bears. And I think that will happen because I think Rodgers will be able to kind of, in a close shootout game, be competitive. And I know that he is 8-2 against the Bears all time. And I know he's 6-2 against Jay Cutler. But there's something about this Bears team that has a better overall feel because I like the pieces they have in their secondary enough to get Rodgers off the field, and Cutler will be able to work with the weapons he has, and if he continues to make sparks, they will win this game, and I feel that he will. This is a home game. This is a home game for the Chicago Bears against a division rival that's had their number over the last several years, including last year where Aaron Rodgers came back and won with that ridiculous Hail Mary throw to Randall Cobb that Chris Conley blew. But this time around, this Packer team just doesn't have the same firepower, doesn't have the same will, and that's going to let the Bears win, even with a gimpy Brandon Marshall, due to the fact that I think Cutler will not make the mistakes, and he'll be able to make more plays in this game against a very weakened Packers defense than Rodgers will against the Bears. It should be very competitive. I'm going to see what's going to happen. I think it's even ways, but I'm going to take the Bears at home because I've been more impressed with what the Bears have been able to do with the weapons they have than what Green Bay has been able to do over the last 3 weeks. So that's why I'm taking the Bears to beat the Packers. Texans over Bills. I'm taking the Houston Texans over the Buffalo Bills because I feel that Houston has just a better team. That with the receivers they have, Andre Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins, Martin, all these guys they had, it's a better receiving corps than Buffalo. Even though I do realize Sammy Watkins did pretty well. He got his first touchdown. He's been doing okay. I just can't trust E.J. Manuel against this tough Houston defense. The way he looked against San Diego. The defenses, to me, though, they cancel out. And I understand that if Arian Foster doesn't play, it's going to change a lot of the dynamic. But going up against this Houston team, Alfred Blue should be able to do enough. Because if Donald Brown can move the chains enough, Houston has better receivers than they do. And actually, I feel like Houston has a better secondary than the Buffalo Bills do. Because remember, they don't have Bird back there anymore. Aaron Williams went down. And I'm just not liking that matchup against these receivers. And also, Ryan Fitzpatrick is facing his former team where he went 20-33. I know that's not a statistic that goes in my favor, but he is going to be motivated to play this Bills team, and I just don't think E.J. Manuel knows what's coming after him. I feel the same way about Fitzpatrick. And the last thing I'm going to go if I take in the Texans is that they've just looked more dominant than the Bills have. Because I can't really put that much into the Miami win. And Chicago, if you think about it, if Jay Cutler doesn't make those mistakes, they probably don't win that game. Where Houston, they beat up a good Redskin team with a lot of defense. And I know they played the Raiders, but the Raiders have not been that bad. So I'll take that in the more acclaim than what the Bills have done. I think it should be a very competitive game. it's kind of like the medium version of Bears and Packers. I'm interested to see what's going to happen in this game, and it's an even toss-up. But I'm going to go with the home team because I feel that Houston has a better receiving core, and their running game should be able to do enough to control, and Fitzpatrick should be motivated to beat E.J. Manuel in this environment. So that's why I'm taking the Texans to beat the Bills. The Colts over the Titans, this was just fairly simple because Tennessee over the last 2 weeks has looked absolutely pathetic. The Bengals just rushed all over them. Jake Locker got hurt. Andy Dalton got a receiving touchdown from a wide receiver. Their cornerback timed the pick so bad that Andy Dalton was able to score as a receiver for a touchdown. And going up against Ahmad Bradshaw, going up against the running backs they have, I know it's not Jeremy Hill and Gio Bernard, but it's Andrew Luck. And just looking at how weak that Titan team has looked, Indianapolis should be able to rush the ball against the Titans, and they should be able to find a lot more wide open passing lanes due to the receivers they have, which are a lot better compared to the other teams they have already faced this year. Because not only do you have Reggie Wayne, you also have Akeem Nicks and T.Y. Hilton in that mix, along with Kobe Fleener, who is not bad. And Andrew Luck should be able to dissect the secondary like a surgeon and kill these Titans. Because if Jake Locker doesn't play, I'm not going to trust Zach Mettenberger, a great LSU Tiger, in his first start with the offense he's had. I know Indianapolis has given up a lot of rushing yards, and I understand that in the second half when Wake Forest came in, they were able to do some work. But I'm just not buying this young and experienced team against an Andrew Luck motivated team in the AFC South after what they did to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, again, that's why I'm taking Indianapolis. I know I think Tennessee has a little bit of a chance because it is a division rival. I do like some of their pieces, but the way they've looked, Indianapolis should be able to get somewhat of a running game, which would be enough for Luck to kill the secondary that Tennessee has to beat the Titans pretty well. I'd say by at least 14. So that's why I'm taking the Colts to beat the Titans. Baltimore over Carolina. This was very tough for me because looking at what Carolina has done in the last 3 weeks, they had more good flashes than bad. But I think not having D'Angelo Williams the other night, Mike Tolbert is now at 6 to 8 weeks. The only receiver they truly have is Kelvin Benjamin. And I feel that Cam Newton and that offensive line got exposed by a very aging Pittsburgh defensive line. And I feel that I'm looking at the Baltimore Ravens, my team, and I'm looking at that we have one of the best defenses in the league, even though I know that the game we played against Cleveland, that was more offensive. And speaking of Baltimore and Cleveland, thank you, Billy Cundiff, for keeping the curse of Baltimore alive. This time you helped us. Even though the 50-yard field goal, I'm not really going to blame you for. That's something that a lot of kickers just have a tough time doing anyway. But the 36-yarder, I was laughing so hard because I would think only against Baltimore would Cundiff get a kick blocked from that long. But I'm going to take Baltimore because I believe that the running backs we have in Bernard Pierce, Justin Forsett, and Lorenzo Taliaferro can do what Pittsburgh did. Because we have a power guy in Taliaferro, and we have two good speed guys in Pierce and Forsett. And then just looking at what Carolina's receiving core has, I like having our safeties go up against their lackluster tight ends, even though Kelvin Benjamin will have a very interesting test against Ladarius Webb or Jimmy Smith, whoever they put on him. And I also feel that this is a game that Steve Smith will want to win, because this is his first time playing his former team since being released by them back in the offseason. I feel that we are more physical than they are, and I feel that the competition that we have beaten or played against in a very good way is better than what Carolina has done. And also, I can just go with the fact that if we can beat Pittsburgh 26-6 and they lose to Pittsburgh 37-19 with the running game they had, this Baltimore team should win because we have just as good a defense and we have a decent enough run game to be able to do what Pittsburgh did against this lackluster secondary on this defense. I believe it'll be a bit of a tough game, but with the injuries they have, Baltimore is going to win this just based on pure grit and toughness and being able to control the ball against this exposing Carolina Panther team. That's why I'm taking the Ravens to beat the Panthers. The Lions over the Jets. I'm taking the Detroit Lions to beat the New York Jets based on the fact that Detroit Lions offense has way too many weapons for me to not be sold against this weak Jets secondary. Because you have Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate. I think even if Deep owners are Anthony Allen, Antonio Allen, Josh Wilson, or Kyle Wilson, I'm sorry, Calvin Pryor, they just have way too many weapons to stop. Do I think that run game might not be effective? Absolutely. Because Wilkerson, Richardson, and those boys are run stuffers. And they definitely can stop the run with the best of them. But I also feel that Geno Smith, again, in this kind of situation, is going to be interesting because I believe both of them, Detroit will give the Jets an opportunity because Matthew Stafford will. Either if he fumbles or he throws picks. But at the same time, I think that cancels out because I feel Geno will do the same thing against this average to a little bit below average secondary. And if I had to look at pure talent all across the board, I'm going to take the Lions to win this game based on the fact that they have the right offense to go against the weakness of the Jets, which is their secondary. It should be interesting and competitive because I feel like if both teams get turnovers or one team gets more turnovers than the other, they might have an advantage to control the game and win. And I think that'll be the team that wins the game. Whoever quarterback or whatever team causes the most turnovers will win the game. And I feel like at the end of the day, the Detroit Lions will get more turnovers and they'll be able to capitalize based on the fact they have a much better offense than the Jets do. So that's why I'm taking the Detroit Lions to beat the New York Jets. Pittsburgh over Tampa. I told everybody in the offseason that I thought Tampa was going to be the Arizona Cardinals of last year. I thought this team was going to be very good. They were going to be very talented because they had all the right pieces in every position. They had a good secondary. They had a phenomenal defensive line with linebackers and defensive ends. They had a solid running back in Doug Martin and a multi-purpose one. Josh McCown had Vincent Jackson and Mike Evans on his wings, and then a 6'5" tight end from Washington. I can't think of his name. But they had all the pieces. And after what I saw in Atlanta on Thursday night last week, the buck stops here for me. I can't buy the Tampa Bay Buccaneers anymore. Even I do realize that Josh McCown is hurt. And I think Mike Glennon, and I liked Mike Glennon a bit. I thought he really did not play that bad. He just couldn't win to me. And I'm just going with that in mind. Pittsburgh right now just has all the momentum. They have a more experienced quarterback. That running game will slash the Tampa Bay defense if they let Steven Jackson. And I think Big Ben, even though there is no Julio Jones, that Pittsburgh defense should be able to make big plays when they need to, especially with the weapons they have in Palomalu, Wireless. They are getting James Harrison back, which is huge. And I feel that Pittsburgh should just slaughter Tampa based on the fact of what Tampa has shown and what Pittsburgh brings to offer, especially after the game they had against their division rival, who they lost by 6, Carolina. So that's why I'm taking Pittsburgh to beat Tampa, and also south to north. Not the greatest transitions. Tampa has to go to Pittsburgh, and I feel that that's not going to be a easy game for them. So that's why I'm taking the Pittsburgh Steelers to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Oakland Raiders over the Miami Dolphins. I will be honest with all of you. This was the hardest game to pick because this game is going to be so bad that literally I will tell you, I think Miami has a shot to win this game. But I'm going to take Oakland because Miami over their last 2 weeks have looked absolutely pathetic. Ryan Tannehill only completed 50% of his passes and only had a touchdown. That Miami offensive line has been abused by defensive lines. The Chief defensive line looked like the old Chief we saw last year, even though they didn't have Derrick Johnson or their nose tackle, Mike DeVito. And looking at what the Raiders have done with what they did against New England's shady offensive line or suspect offensive line, I feel Oakland will be able to get enough pressure. And honestly, if you wanted me to compare both quarterbacks, I'll say Derek Carr is playing better than Ryan Tannehill right now. I know Ryan Tannehill has a win, and I'm not saying he's... But if I had to pick, Derek Carr is playing better. He is not the reason why the Oakland Raiders have been losing these games. I just feel it's just a lack of talent in a lot of the offensive positions. And just going against this Miami weak offensive line and weak mindset team, that's going to be good enough because that secondary should be able to shut down Miami's receivers enough. I know it's Mike Wallace going up against Charles Woodson, an aging Charles Woodson. You got Carlos Rogers and Terrell, who aren't bad, but I'm going to go with Oakland based on the fact that Oakland has just looked better to me than Miami has over the last 3 weeks. Because if you really think about it, New England hasn't looked that good, and they beat up a Minnesota team without Adrian Peterson, and they lost by 7. And they could have been tied to the Raiders. So I'm not really going to take that New England game into much either. Well, I'm going to say Oakland's played a solid Jet team and lost by 5. They got beat out by the Texans, so I really can't defend that. But looking at how Oakland's played, they should be able to beat this Miami team due to the fact that that defense can get to Tannehill. And Derek Carr, with the way Ryan, should be able to outplay Derek Carr, or should be able to outplay Ryan Tannehill today. And McFadden and Jones-Drew together, that should be enough to offset Lamar Miller. So that's why I'm taking the Oakland Raiders to beat the Miami Dolphins. Jacksonville at San Diego. I've bolted up, and I am become a solid believer in the San Diego Charger team. They looked extremely impressive over in their 22-10 victory over Buffalo, because Buffalo had been a team that had been very impressive over the last 2 weeks, and San Diego was able to shut them down tremendously. And looking at the lack of what Jacksonville has, San Diego should be able to do the same thing. Even though, like I said before in the video, I feel bad for Ryan Matthews and Danny Woodhead. They are both covering from injury, so step in Donald Brown. Donald Brown will be able to do enough to offset, and I think he will do actually better than Ahmad Bradshaw did in Indy last week. And looking at San Diego's overall defense, they have really no shot to... Or they should have no problem. I was wrong. They should really have no problem stopping this Jacksonville offense that has only scored a grand total of 17 points in their first... They've averaged about a little bit over 13 points a game, where San Diego has averaged 47, 60, 69, about 20, they've averaged 23 points a game. And Jacksonville's also lost their games by an average 25 points. So even if their running game doesn't get rolling, the San Diego Charger offense should be able to pick up the slack and be able to pass all over them to win this game. It's really not going to be that much of a contest, even though I do expect Blake Bortles to make this team more competitive than it has been over the last 3 weeks under Chad Henne. So best of luck to Bortles, but no way you're beating San Diego in San Diego with the lack of talent you have right now, because I do believe the Jacksonville Jaguars are the worst team in the National Football League. Atlanta over Minnesota. I am taking Atlanta. I know they are on the road, and the last time they were on the road, especially around the Eastern Midwest area, they lost 24-10 to Cincinnati. However, Minnesota's defense is not Cincinnati's. Minnesota's defense does not nearly have enough firepower on the defensive line and the back end to stop Matt Ryan's offense. And also, that offense has only scored 1 touchdown in 2 games. I understand that Teddy Bridgewater, this is his big opportunity to keep the job because Matt Castle has now been put on IR due to a broken foot. But with that in mind, with how good that Atlanta team has played, I expect Devin Hester to be able to be more effective again in all phases, along with Teddy Bridgewater not being able to outgun Ryan. And that Atlanta secondary will be able to get Bridgewater to make a few mistakes since this is his first official start in the league. And I feel like that Minnesota offensive line will also get beat around due to the talent they have on the line with Corey Peters, Peter Warlow, OC, all those guys. They should be able to easily beat this Minnesota team, which is reeling off the lack of offense due to AP being out and Atlanta, even in the cold, being able to use Jackson in that offense to destroy or to beat the Minnesota Vikings secondary. So that's what I'm taking Atlanta to beat Minnesota. Philly over San Francisco. I am taking the Philadelphia Eagles to beat the San Francisco 49ers due to the fact that Philadelphia and San Fran are almost the same opposite, or the exact opposite of teams. San Francisco is one of the best teams at scoring in the first half of games. In fact, they've scored all their points in the first half of games. Whereas for Philadelphia, they have scored 0, 6, and 14. They have scored 20 points in the first half of their games. In the second half, the San Francisco 49ers have scored nothing. They have scored no points in the second half. The only team in the league not to score any points in the second half, where Philadelphia leads the league in scoring the most points in the second half. So, even with San Francisco doing well, I'm not concerned if they go down by 10 to the Philadelphia Eagles, because Philadelphia's offense should be in the second half be able to respond against this weak San Francisco secondary. Philadelphia's offensive line, look, I understand it's beat up. Evan Mathis went down, and I know Shady and Sproles, they're not going to be able to run enough. But Foles should be able to outgun Kaepernick based on the lack of discipline as well by the 49ers. They have led the league in penalties. They had over 10 penalties for over 180 yards last week against the Arizona Cardinals. Drew Stanton was able to come back against them. And Jay Cutler. And just with all those in mind, Philadelphia should be able to go out to a lukewarm crowd in Levi Stadium in Santa Clara and beat this struggling and depleting Niners team and drop Jim Harbaugh 2 games below 500 for the first time in his whole career. And I would be very concerned as a Niner fan for this team moving forward because they can't stop anybody, and the only team that's getting in their own way is themselves. And I feel like that will happen again. And also I'm going to go with the fact that Chip Kelly, more times than not, always beat Jim Harbaugh when it was Oregon and Stanford. So that's what I'm taking Philadelphia to beat San Francisco. In the Sunday night game, New Orleans and Dallas, I know this is a really big upset for me, but I'm actually going to take the Dallas Cowboys to beat the New Orleans Saints. I am. Because I'm looking at the fact that New Orleans in their home opener, this is the place where they were 8-0 last year. They scored over about almost 30 points a game against this weak Minnesota secondary, scored a grand total of 20 points. Are you kidding me? At home against the Vikings, you scored 20 points? 20. Their defense did a heck of a job. But looking at what Dallas has, even though I do understand that Justin Durant was out, and Rolando McClain, and Morris Claiborne just left the team for the Cowboys. You know, he is back, but he's lost his starting cornerback job to Orlando Scandrick. I feel the Dallas Cowboys can win this game. Because if Romo has a much better offensive line than he's ever had. He's probably had the best offensive line he's had in years. And he should be able to run the ball against this Saints defense. The Falcons were able to do it well enough. The Browns were able to do it well enough. And DeMarco Murray is a good enough back to have that happen. I also feel that Terrence Williams and Bryant can outmatch the Saints secondary. I think Jason Witten will have a tough time, but again, Jason Witten really hasn't done anything. So it's really not that big of a difference. However, at the end of the day, I'm just going with the fact that over the last 10 games with New Orleans, they are 3-7 on the road. 3-7. And going into a more motivated Dallas team with a much better defense than anybody expected in Dallas, if Tony Romo does not make mistakes, the Dallas Cowboys should be able to win this game in a close shootout-type game. Even though I remember the last time they played back in 2012, or last year, I remember the Saints gave up 40. The Saints scored 40 first downs. They scored 56 points, and Dallas just looked pathetic. This time, different story. I think it'll be a very competitive game against the much better offensive team. But with just how New Orleans has played on the road, I can't trust them anymore. And I'm going to take the Dallas Cowboys from what I've seen from them. Even though I remember their home opener, Tony Romo threw 3 picks, but I do not expect that game to happen this time against the Saints defense. So that's why I'm taking the Dallas Cowboys to beat the New Orleans Saints. And lastly, the New England Patriots over Kansas City. This was a really hard game because there's a part of me that wanted to take Kansas City because I thought they were impressive enough against Miami that, you know, they scored 34 points. They only allowed 19. But if Jamal Charles does not play, Niall Davis will get squished by this defense. And I believe that New England will do enough defensively that Tom Brady should be able to get more plays than Alex Smith. Do I expect New England to put up a lot of points? No, just because that offensive line's been beat up. Casey's defense has a good defensive line. But at the end of the day, if I had to trust Tom Brady or Alex Smith in this type of game, I'm going to go with Tom Brady to win this game, just like he did last week against the Raiders. So those are all my picks and thoughts on all the games this week. Like, comment, rate, subscribe. If anybody has any questions, please put them in the comment section or direct message me, because I'd love to talk football and have debate and to see how other football fans feel about the games and their players and their teams. So please put that in the comment section. And till next week, this is Matt the NFL Fanatic signing off. Good luck to all the teams, good luck to all fantasy players, and good luck to all fellow prognosticators. Till next week, so long.